Hey peeps, welcome to the fourth episode of the Work with What You Got podcast. My name is Devin, aka Dina Chaitanya. Today we're going to be talking with a lovely young lady called Sarah, whose Instagram profile, I'm not actually too sure if you have other profiles, TikTok, Facebook, all of that stuff, but she goes by or she's running a like a what how I don't know how do you describe what you're doing actually, but it's like an organized.
I just share the knowledge that I have.
Okay, so she's a knowledge sharer. Let's go with that. I'll find a more technical term to dub you later on in the podcast. But yeah, so her Instagram page is called Nonviolent Communication. So yeah, so this is Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited to hear a lot about you and a lot about nonviolent communication and you know yeah, all about that, like how it helped you, how you got into it, and what is the purpose of nonviolent communication, because I have my ideas just from seeing what you've done and the way I understand things. I have my perspective, but I want to hear what you have to say first, and then I will, as we go, I'll share a little bit about how I see what you're doing. And yeah, so on that note, let's start with the basic question: what is nonviolent communication?
So, nonviolent communication is a way of connecting with other people through compassionate communication.
Hmm.
So, nonviolent says what it isn't, and compassionate says what it is. Because some people can hear nonviolent and kind of be off put a little bit. Um, and what we do by using nonviolent communication is attempt to get everyone's needs met. So a lot of people nowadays aren't in touch with their needs and they don't even know how to ask for or work towards getting their needs met and end up getting further away from that. So this is kind of like a structure to have like the framework to be able to get your needs fulfilled and accept your feelings and other people's feelings and have deeper connections with other people.
Could you give me an example? Like what do you mean when you say needs? What needs are we talking about? Like just in general or in an intimate relationship or in any relationship or any sort of dynamic with other people? Yeah, let me know how far it goes.
So needs can be anywhere from food and water to needing closeness or respect. So
Mm.
most of the time when we say I need, we fill in the blank with an action, but really there's like an underlying general term that can be used. So some people say like, um, I need you to listen to me, but their need might be respect. And
Mm.
you can get a number of ways, but what they're requesting is for you to listen to them. So that's sort of how some people get it twisted a little bit, but I can go more into the framework itself if that's helpful for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I have my idea around communication, and I appreciate people who can communicate well. Not that I can always do it myself because I'm still figuring myself
Yeah,
out and still maturing in a lot of ways. But I do appreciate when someone can communicate something without like blaming you for a need
yes,
that they have that's unmet. So,
yes,
for instance, if you're in a relationship with someone and they feel like they've been neglected, so then they blame you and say, "Blah blah blah," but it's all your fault. But they are feeling neglected. So to me, I just shut off and I don't listen when that happens because I don't know, maybe it's a male thing, but I don't like to feel like I'm the problem. And with someone else's needs, I will gladly try and meet that person's needs where I can if they communicate in a way that is like conducive to like having respect in the relationship. Yeah.
I think what you're saying can um, have a lot of people feeling defensive when they hear that.
Mm.
And it's really hard sometimes to hear what the person is saying and beyond what they're saying. So, like, how they got to what they are saying. Because it can sound like when someone is blaming you or criticizing you, it's very easy to take it personally and not hear the underlying
The
of what
need.
they're doing at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so that's a whole thing in itself. I can talk a little bit more about that if you want, or I
Sure,
can
sure.
like,
Where I'm going with that, it requires like a lot of like present moment awareness. Because in order to not be caught up in taking something personally from someone, you would have to be very like in the moment and realize like, oh wow, okay, cool. Like I don't know what I did wrong, but and I don't think that I'm the cause of this, but clearly the person is feeling a certain way, and their only way of communicating it is through this whatever way it came out. So yeah,
yeah,
present moment awareness is a big thing.
and being able to filter through that judgment. Because like, one thing that NVC has taught me the most out of anything is that nobody can make you feel a certain way,
Mm.
which might be controversial. I know a lot of people don't think that way. Um, but it's really your perception of what they said and how you react to it. So like, it goes both ways too. Like you can't make anyone feel a certain way, they can't make you feel a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you would have to be very like grounded in yourself in order to
Yeah.
stop someone from affecting you. Like I I can do it to a certain extent. I have a quite a aloof attitude when it comes to most things. So if someone does something, I tend to be more aloof or detached. But still, like there are moments where I like it's so hard not to get caught up in the energy of the moment, you know, and get caught into my defense mechanism of fight or flight or whatever. So yeah. So nonviolent communication, from what you're saying, is a way to for both parties to learn to come to a common ground, basically. Is that what you're trying
Yeah.
to say?
Yes, and it's mostly centered around collaboration and authenticity. Whereas, like, if you both get defensive about something, you just like ignore it, then that's like based on avoidance. So it's really more about strengthening that connection instead
Mm.
of pulling you two apart in the process.
So what if, let me just paint a picture for you. What if there's one
Mhm.
person who knows the framework for nonviolent communication, but the other person has no idea? So how will a
Mhm.
dynamic like that work? I mean, because you can only go so far, and if someone's not willing to meet you halfway, then are there tactics that you can get them to do that? Or do you just at some point realize that, okay, I tried, but this isn't working, so now I need to respect myself and move on? Or yeah, how would you go about a situation like that?
So I've actually experienced this a lot because, as you know, I'm very passionate about this, and not everyone I speak to is.
You're the person
I,
that knows the NVC, but the other people don't. So you can give us some practical
exactly.
examples. Yeah, I'm sure you've had some things that have happened. So yeah, let us know.
Yeah. So, um, it is pretty difficult to get someone to hear uh, a whole new way of speaking because this is not a language that they're used to. This is not how people are raised. And societal norms kind of shy people away from this way of thinking. So, um, I think the most important thing is if you're trying to introduce it to them, introducing it in a way that is not like, this is the right way to think or this is the right way to talk. Because that can make them feel bad or defensive about the way that they already do. And kind of, I think the most important thing is introducing it as an alternative that you think would be helpful for them or beneficial for them.
Hmm.
And if they're unwilling to really hear you out, then for me, so far, the best way has been just showing them with my actions and my words and expressing in a way that they can still hear. Because sometimes they're like, don't use that psychology shit on me or whatever. But like, if you if you say it in a way that they can hear it, but also revolve it around NVC, it's not so much what you say, it's how you present your words.
So in other words, what you're saying is like be a good embodiment of the practice itself. And
Yeah.
hopefully that's I mean, not everyone's going to be receptive to it because I mean, from my experience, everybody's on a different sort of frequency. So some people may be very, very ready for progressing and maturing in a certain way, and some people are just really not ready for that. So you as a person, are you a qualified practitioner? Is it something that you study, NVC?
I'm self-taught.
Self-taught. Okay. Okay, great.
I found the workshops online and I've probably watched every single video I've found on it about 20 times.
That's cool.
Uh,
Shows you're
yeah,
dedicated. Yeah, that's cool.
very much so.
So that brings me to the question. So now we know a little bit about NVC, but like, what has your journey been like with NVC? Like before this version of this podcast, you did mention that you're 18, turning 19 years old. So what has happened in
19,
your life? You are 19 years old.
19 turning 20
You're
next
19,
month.
turning 20. Okay, my bad. Sorry. So what has
Okay.
brought you to this point? I mean, what has happened in your life that you were like, I need to learn how to do nonviolent
Yeah.
communication? What went down? Yeah.
So, I moved out of my mom's house, and after that, I kind of started a self-discovery journey. So I was, watching all the self-help videos and trying to find the secret to like life and all this stuff.
Sure.
And I came across, after like a while of that, I came across nonviolent communication. There's like a workshop online that's about 3 hours on YouTube. And I was just like amazed. Like at first it seemed a little off-putting and I was like, this is like too simple. Like this cannot work. And so I watched it once and I was like, hmm. And so I watched it again and I started to um implement it into my life in a way that I could start to test it out, sort of. So like you can hear something and see the value in it, but until you build up that evidence for yourself, you're not going to be able to fully believe it. So that's kind of what I worked on first is like seeing if this was actually true, seeing if this is something that um, I could use in my life to strengthen my connections with other people and with myself. And so prior to finding NVC, I'll kind of do like my life before and leading to and then after NVC. Just
It's great. I was
yeah.
actually just gonna ask, okay, cool, but like, so what happened? Like there's always this, I mean, with myself, and I'm sure with a lot of people who have got onto like self-help or spiritual path or something like that, there's always something that has happened, something that clicked or something that switched. Like for me, it was a bad breakup. I had a very terrible breakup when I was quite young, and I'm 29, by the way, just so you know, seeing as I know your age. But anyway, so when I was about 17, 18, I think 18, maybe 18, 19, I had a bad breakup and I started to look at things differently. I was like, this can't be everything, I can't just feel so sad and so like lost
Yeah.
without someone. So I started delving into different things. I won't go into all of that. I'll save that for another podcast. But anyway, so that led me onto like a different path, like with yourself. So yes, so what happened is my question. How did you get to that point of being like, oh, I need to find something different to do with my energy and need to change the way I think and feel and yeah.
So it was sort of like a buildup. For years, I was solely driven off of guilt and shame. That is like probably the main motivator for all my actions for up until a few years ago.
Guilt and shame. Wow, okay. Sure.
Yeah. And I was very scared of what people thought of me, which most people are. Um, and I didn't know how to express my needs as a gift. I was a people pleaser at heart, didn't know how to say no. Um, most of my decisions led to self-sabotage because of that. And I was always worried about what other people thought or expected of me instead of making decisions based off my values. I had very strong emotions. I always thought that I was like some hypersensitive person and that there was something wrong with me. And like I had no respect and trust in my decision making because I always made my decisions based off what other people wanted from me. And I felt like I had to do things for people and all this stuff. So that's sort of centered around how I was raised. And I think so that was leading up to it. And the thing that would kind of like set me off into my self-discovery journey was me and my mom were fighting a lot and she's an alcoholic. just she's not gonna watch this. So hey, mom.
Hey, you never know. But anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah. So that kind of didn't help our relationship at all, and we never really had a great relationship. And so one day, like for 2 weeks, she knew that she was gonna kick me out. She never told me. And one day my dad was like, "Hey, I'm gonna come down and have lunch with you." He lives 2 hours away. I'm like, "Okay, I have work tomorrow, but like I can squeeze you in." And so we went to go eat, and he's like, "Oh, so when we get home, you're gonna pack up all your stuff and you're gonna come live with me." And I was like, "I have work." Like, what do you mean? Like, I was so confused. And so I went home and my mom like was like, "I'm so sorry," like all this stuff. And I was like, "Why didn't you tell me? Like, you knew for 2 weeks and you didn't tell me." And so after that, I
She was kicking you out because she just like is that type of person, or like,
well, 2 weeks before this, I told her I felt like she had me like as a baby or whatever and didn't think about what it would be like to take care of me because
uh,
like never had a good relationship.
you went there.
That's probably the worst thing I've ever said to her. So, like,
Sure.
but anyways, that hit a little too hard. Um, and so, anyways, I packed up all my stuff that day. I was really sad. I didn't get even say bye to my sister. I didn't say bye to any of my friends. I went straight to my work, told them the situation. They were cool with it, and then I was off to go live with my dad. So that was the situation. Um, Luckily, my dad has stepped up so much. He's literally like my favorite person in the whole entire world. We've built the strongest connection. We get along so well. It's so different. Like he makes up for everything that's ever happened to me, which I'm very grateful for. But he kind of just like swooped in, and even though I didn't really want to at the time, like took me in and took care of me and just kind of helped the situation. So I moved, and I was very upset. I was very sad, and I was just watching videos all the time, like trying to figure out something that would settle this like never-ending discomfort in me. And I know I watched.
What was the discomfort? Just the things that had happened, or you were just like those things brought out a discomfort or uncomfortable feeling within yourself?
Um, for a lot of time after it happened, I was sort of upset with my mom because I was like, "Why would you do that?" And then like text me hearts and stuff. Like it didn't make sense, like what? Like I
Mom
don't know.
sounds kind of
But,
confused there. I'm not gonna lie. Love-hate
yeah, it's like,
relationship. Yeah.
yeah, like she wanted to still be friends or something. And I was like,
Mm.
this is weird. And I had a lot of resentment towards her, and
Yeah, no doubt.
not just that, just like our whole relationship. And I think it was like getting away from that and like not being manipulated on a daily basis. Like
Mm.
getting away from that was like the thing that gave me the space to be able to grow and to be able to learn freely and openly and just like have the space to accept new ideas. And so when I found NVC, that was like the perfect time that I could have ever found it because I was so like open to it. Like basically when you hit rock bottom, you're willing to accept any answer. Like you're just searching for something that works. And
Mm.
so that's kind of where I was in that moment. Like I was 2 hours away from all my friends, didn't have contact with my sister, like bad relationship with my mom, moved in with my dad who I've never lived with before. Like it was a whole thing. And I think that's really what led me to NVC.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. You mentioned simplicity earlier, so I just want to touch on simplicity and rock bottom. So oftentimes you said something about um, it was so simple, like it was like you were almost like flabbergasted. How could it be this simple, you know? And oftentimes the truth that we're looking for is the simplest thing, but because we're so complex and we're so like all over the place, it seems really hard to do. But ultimately, it's actually living the truth, whatever that is for yourself, is oftentimes the most simple thing. You know, it's letting go of all the complexities that are in us in order to
Yeah.
align with the truth. Because when you're simple, then everything else becomes simple. Your dealings become simple with people, your life becomes simple because, you know, you're just a simple person. There's no, like, not too much complexity in your life. So
Yeah.
I always like the idea of simplicity. I'm a very, that's like what my heart yearns for, is like simplicity.
Mhm.
Whenever I have moments of like, I'm just so frustrated with life, I always just think, just come back to simplicity, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you said that, because it is a big part of, I think, understanding or undoing our conditioning that we've built up, you know, or that we've learned from our parents, is just seeing that, or understanding that the truth to everything is oftentimes the simplest answer. And, you know, that's what we should go with. Simple communication, simple, non-violent communication. I actually would rather call it compassionate communication. It sounds so much better.
It does.
Yeah, yeah.
And
CC,
the
compassion.
reason that
Anyway.
Marshall named it nonviolent communication is because it brought him closer to the people that needed it most. So, like in prisons and jails, and
Uh, mm, mm,
nonviolent was that thing that it gets your attention because it has the word violent in it.
mm,
And for the people who were there for violence, it kind of like gave them that pathway to be able to like see it. And because if you go to prison, you're like, I want to teach you compassionate communication. All of them are going to be like, okay,
hell
like
no! Get out of
exactly,
here!
exactly. So
That
I
would
think
be
that's why he kept it as that, even though he didn't like that it said like what it wasn't instead of what it was. So yeah.
true. He was doing, it's like, if you run a business, you have to have like a specific avatar that you
Yeah.
communicating towards, right? So you create your avatar. It's this type of person. His avatar was a prison mate, murders, drugs,
Yeah.
gang. So
Yes.
compassionate communication to a gang member doesn't really sound very like, it sounds too like hearts, you know, like hearts, and non-violent
Soft.
sounds way better. It sounds like you're in like the military and you're going to defuse bombs and, you know,
Yeah.
solve terrorist situations. So
Yeah.
I get it. I get it, is what I'm saying. So
No,
yeah.
yeah.
So coming back to the other point of rock bottom, is that it's interesting that, how do I say this? It's interesting that oftentimes what it takes for someone to realize they need to change is often hitting that place of rock bottom. Like with myself, having a really bad breakup. Before I mean, granted, I was quite young, but before that, I didn't even think about anything to do with anything spiritual, you know? I wasn't thinking along the lines of anything beyond my everyday life, which was at
Mhm.
that time going to school, my girlfriend, my friends, and doing a lot of other stuff. And yeah, I didn't think beyond anything else. You know, I didn't think beyond any of that. But the breakup got me thinking about stuff, you know? At that moment of rock bottom got me really just like, is this all there is? You know, is this who I'm gonna be for the rest of my life? Because I don't really like it, you know? I don't
Yeah.
like this version of myself. So, you know, there must be some way that I can, you know, change or like grow, or like there must be something other than just this experience I'm having. So yeah, it's interesting that you said that. And it's interesting that it's not just an experience that you and I have had, but like almost everybody that I've spoken to that has gotten onto something similar, like nonviolent communication or like maturing or on a spiritual path, they've oftentimes hit those moments and just been like, I need to change. Something needs to change. I don't know what it is, but something needs to change. And that rock bottom moment, like, opened us up in what I would call a moment of surrender. And you're like, okay, what else is there now?
It like brings us to a place where we're willing to accept an answer that we probably wouldn't have prior, you know?
We drop those walls of false
Hmm.
ego. We drop the walls of the ego, which is oftentimes what stops us from communicating. I mean, you can tell me, this is just what I understand through communication. But when you have a conflict between two people, it's the ego. It's 100% the ego fighting with an ego. It's a hurt fighting with a hurt. So how I understand what you were saying, well, from what I gathered from NVC and or nonviolent communication and looking at your Instagram page and so on and so forth, it's learning to communicate with respect, basically. Even if someone is being like super angry at you and they're being super disrespectful, that shouldn't change your level of communication. That shouldn't change your level of respect in how you communicate. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think something that's really helpful to add to what you said, part of what NVC is, so there's a easier way to conceptualize it, which is Marshall, you've probably heard of this. He goes into the difference between a giraffe and a jackal. So a giraffe is someone who uses nonviolent communication to connect with others, and a jackal is someone who doesn't. So it's not to say like this is the way to do it or whatever. It's just to show the difference between them. And to your point, it's easier to think about hearing the need behind and the feelings behind someone's request, or if they're being judgmental or whatever. If you, like he says, put on your giraffe ears. So it's like you're more conscious of the way you're hearing someone else communicate. And regardless of what they say, your goal is to try to hear what's being said underlyingly, even if it's not said directly.
Mm. Okay. So
Like about
again,
breath.
let's paint a picture. Let's paint a picture. So give me an example of where you would use NVC.
Oh, okay. So this is a little different than what I was just saying, but this is the example that I kind of fall back on because it makes a lot of sense to me. So say going into relationship side of it. So say you're in a relationship with someone and you're, what you might say is, you know, he never does the dishes. He's too lazy to do anything around here. I have to do everything around here. I'm the only one to get things done. Okay. That's what a jack would say, right? Okay. So then the NVC side of it, for the example, would be like going to your partner and saying, no, I feel overwhelmed because of my need for cleanliness. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to do the dishes when you get done doing whatever you're doing or when you get a free moment to. And so the shift there is, instead of saying like something judgmental, something that's going to set them off, something that's going to get them further away from even like considering what you said, you present it in a way that tells them what need it would meet for you and how they can contribute to that. And normally it's a lot easier for someone to hear that, especially when you use an observation instead of an analysis. So the framework that we kind of touched on before but didn't really say is observations, feelings, needs, and then requests. So the observation in that would be, I see that there's dirty dishes in the sink. Instead of like, he never washes the dishes, whatever. And the feeling would be overwhelmed, and the need would be cleanliness or serenity, or you can input anything, whatever need it meets for you. And in this situation, the request was, whenever you get a moment to, or whenever you're done doing what you're doing, could you start on it, right? So instead of using blame, criticism, entitlement, all those things, we use this framework. And you may have to do it a few times. It may not work the first time. Like that's just how it is. People aren't used to communicating like this, but it helps you get further towards your goal, which is connecting with each other. If the other person can see it as a gift and that they have an opportunity to contribute to your well-being, then they're more likely to hear it, whether, as opposed to you saying, you know,
As opposed to
you're
using blame.
you're
Yeah,
doing
like
this.
you're too busy and you don't care and blah blah blah.
Yes,
And that creates distance as opposed to creating a bridge to create
exactly.
something. So basically what you're saying, from what I gather, it's like speaking with like a collaboration outcome mindset. You mentioned collaboration earlier, and that popped in my
Yeah.
mind while you were talking, is that the one practicing MVC is trying to create a space for collaboration
Mhm.
in
Yes.
amidst the difficulty or the challenge or the issue that you're faced with. So whether it's so, for instance, you were complaining to me and you're telling me that you're so busy all the time, you never make time for me, we never hang out, and this is this and blah blah blah. If I was one practicing NVC, I would apply like a observation, like, hey, you seem like you're feeling really distressed. It's making me feel a little bit closed off because, I didn't realize that, I'm just doing me. I didn't realize that I had such an effect on you. I would feel more comfortable. So the need would be feel more comfortable if you could rephrase or calm down a little bit, and then we can communicate in a more respectful way. Because this dynamic isn't really helping me to feel connected here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then what you would have, if you were the one practicing NVC, you can tell me what you would have done in that situation, how you would have phrased it.
You mean on the other side of that?
Yeah.
So 2 ways. You could either say yes or no. So if you said yes, then you would say, I'm feeling really thankful that you shared that with me, and I could see that that was really heavy on your heart. And you could say, would you be willing to wait 20 minutes or something? I don't know. Like, say you need rest in this situation, then I could say, I can see that you're really tired and had a long day. And I'm feeling really thankful that you were willing to hear me out. And I need clarification and reassurance to know that you'll get around to it when you have a moment to. Would you be willing to do it in an hour or something? But say you said no, right? I could say, I'm feeling a little hesitant to ask for anything right now because I could see that this is something that you're not very willing to do, and I'm needing some clarification on what's keeping you from wanting to do that. So then, if you ask for what's getting in the way of them saying yes, it gives you an opportunity to hear them out, but also them an opportunity to explain what is getting in the way of them saying yes. Because oftentimes, if the person hears it as a gift, they're going to want to contribute. So, or if they have something to do, that can come into play. So, like, they're like, oh, well, I'm really stressed out because I have a meeting in 20 minutes or whatever. Then you can hear them about that instead of them suppressing that. And I think it's really helpful to connect on that level, even if you don't come to like the agreement that you were hoping for. You still end up with that shared humanness and can come to a resolution instead of either A, the person says yes and doesn't actually want to, that's not giving out a joyful energy. Or B, the other person says no, and then you just don't talk about it and avoid the situation. So it's like those two things you want to get away from. You want joyful giving. And so it's like the shift that you can make. That's what nonviolent communication does.
So in other words, nonviolent communication involves a level of, well, doesn't just involve, but it is learning to be vulnerable and learning
Yes.
to instead of like reacting to the moment, you take a step back and you think, okay, so what am I feeling and what need am I trying to get met through my complaint or through my anger or through my whatever is coming out at the moment. So it's taking a moment to reflect and then to figure out, okay, so I'm feeling neglect, I'm feeling unloved, I'm feeling, I'm feeling whatever it is I'm feeling, and then bringing that to the forefront as opposed to all of the other things that are covering it, all that anger and all that frustration, and rather communicating from the place of like, hey, I'm just feeling a little bit neglected right now. Because I mean, for me, if someone has to do that, if you're my friend or if you're my woman or whatever, I want to obviously be there and assist you. So if you have to communicate in a way where you talk about yourself, I will step out of my whatever is the issue mindset and be like,
Mhm.
oh, damn, I didn't realize that I made you feel that way. I'm so sorry. How can I make it better? You know, what do you need? Do you need some
Yeah.
time? Do you want to go for ice cream? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? You know? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's sometimes it's like the littlest things sometimes. Someone just wants to feel heard. Someone just wants to feel seen. Someone just wants to have some acknowledgement a lot of the time, you know, when there's anguish and there's anger. Like, you know, I don't know if you know this, but anger is like a secondary emotion, right? So it's not a primary emotion. Oftentimes, anger is just the result of like a lot of sadness. So when you deal with someone who's very angry, they're oftentimes just hiding a lot of sadness within them. And that sadness comes from 10 to 1, not feeling seen, not being heard, not being acknowledged, and not being loved. You know?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just interesting to understand that, because when it happens to you, you can be like, oh, wow, okay. So the anger actually has nothing to do with me. This is just their response, their unconscious response to a situation that they don't know how to communicate their needs in. So they don't know how to be vulnerable, or they don't know that it's necessary to be vulnerable, as opposed to being angry and frustrated right now. So
Most people don't have the tools to be able to work through those emotions. So
yes, there we go.
most people see they see anger, guilt, shame, and depression as something bad. So they
Mm,
either ignore it, which makes it show up in other places in their life, or they try to face it head on in a way that makes them spiral. So um, the thing that really helps me that I've learned about nonviolent communication is that anytime you're feeling anger, guilt, shame, or depression, those don't need to be seen as something that is bad or good,
mm,
right? Those need to be seen as indicators that we are disconnected from our needs. So
mm.
anytime you feel that, say, I'm disconnected from my needs, and then it leads you to go in the path of getting those needs met instead of spiraling or having a cycle like a shame cycle or whatever. Like, if you do that, you're going to be stuck in it. It's not going to go away. It's going to keep coming up. Every time you shove it down, it's going to keep popping up. But if you actually address it head on with nonviolent communication, you're 100 times more likely to be able to get your needs met and settle those feelings and accept them and invite them and know that they are getting you closer to what you need.
So in other words, it's like learning to emotionally regulate yourself.
Mhm.
So learning which way helps you to feel calm and grounded again after you've stepped into like a big sack of sadness, or a big sack of anger, or a big sack of frustration, or whatever, or depression even. And then
Mhm.
learning, having a sort of like a method to get yourself, an emotional regulation method to get yourself from that point into a calmer space, so you can realize what's lying underneath that.
Yes,
Is that
exactly.
what you're trying to say?
Yes.
So I picked up on three main things. So simplicity, so far, simplicity. This is what, like, I'm just making
Mhm.
key takeaway points along. So simplicity. So nonviolent communication is about simplicity, bringing things down to simple needs and feelings. Vulnerability, learning to not be scared to say whatever the need is that we're feeling, even if it is something like, you know, I feel like I need some love. Because how simple is that, right? As opposed to, blah, 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 it's your fault, blah, blah, blah. I just need some love, you know? And then
Mhm.
emotional regulation. So bringing yourself to a calm space so that you can communicate the need and whatever it is in a respectful way. Yeah, because oftentimes people don't realize that when you communicate with anger, I mean, it's sort of like a cliche idea or a cliche saying, but anger does cause a lot of hurt. If you
Okay.
say something out of anger, I mean, I know I've done it and people have done it to me, and you're like, damn, that's
Yeah.
intense, man. Like, wow, like you really went there. That wasn't necessary, you know? And
For people.
you can't undo that, you know?
Yeah.
Like with you and your mom, I'm pretty sure, I mean, you can tell me, but was the situation where you said what you said to her out of a moment of anger with her?
I think it was a little bit of that, a little resentment, really.
Hmm.
Um, but I felt like I just needed to say it because I said it to someone, one of my friends, and whenever I said it, it rang very true to me, and I was like, I need to say that to her.
I need to say this. But what was
Yeah.
the underlying afterwards? You obviously took some time to reflect. So what was the underlying feeling? Maybe you just felt, because if I'm looking from an observational point of view, maybe you felt disconnected from your mom. You felt a lack
Mhm.
of a relationship with your mom. So you immediately found something to pinpoint and be like, that's the issue, as opposed to I'm just feeling unloved or unconnected to, or whatever the case may be.
I
Yeah.
think I was feeling, um, I think I was feeling a little first hesitant to bring it up, but the underlying feeling in that, I would say it was, I'm trying to think. Well, I know the need was for understanding because I was confused because I needed understanding. That's what it was. Because I was like, how could you have a person have a child and like not think about what it would be like to take care of them? Like, I'm not going to go into my whole story or anything, but like
Mm-mm.
it was very evident that like the care that she had for me was not something that was like very much thought about, or like it wasn't very mutual between us. And so that I was hurt. You know, you could say that too, but I think I was more confused, like why do you want a relationship with me if you're not like caring for me, you know?
Mm. Anyway, we don't have to delve too much into it. I'm analyzing it like through and through already. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I guess
I
that's a
had a
topic for for another. That's like it's like a personal conversation. We don't have to go too deep into
if you blow up something, I'll come back and tell my life story.
it. Sure, yeah, but that's another podcast. Sarah's life story, nonviolent communication. Yes, all of that stuff in action. This is more about
um,
nonviolent communication, though. Yeah. So.
there there was a few things that I was thinking about, like my gears were turning while you were talking earlier.
Mm.
Um, so two things. There are some things that like in my language, so NVC is like a way of communicating. So there's some things regarding language that I have like cut out completely, that I think are worth noting
Like
because some of
prison
the
words, you know, when you say like can't, won't, shouldn't, prison
yes,
words.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Um, so to your point, can't, um, that to me is a very limiting word. So anytime anyone says that, it's their excuse for saying why they don't want to do something.
Mm.
Um, because like even if, or you may want to, but there's something keeping you from wanting to fully, right? So you can't, it's not that you can't do it, you're choosing like the better alternative for your situation, for your well-being, you know? Um,
Which sometimes is
and
necessary. It's not always that can't is like a really negative thing, but sometimes it is where someone can do it, but they're telling you they can't because they just don't want to. They're too selfish or whatever the case.
it's selfish labeling, but I get what you're saying, yes.
Sometimes you have to call a spade a spade. Sometimes it is like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is the thing with these types of
Or,
methods is
oh,
that sometimes we also like water down people's behavior, which is something that I see the benefit in sometimes, you know, I give the benefit of the doubt, but sometimes it is just who the person is, you know, they are being selfish. And to it's not a label, it's more just like that's what they're doing, you know, you're pointing out the obvious, at least in my opinion. Yeah.
no, I get what you're saying completely. And I thought about that and thought that way for many years. And for me, I think the only thing that keeps me away from using that sort of language, like labeling someone as selfish or needy or whatever, is that it disconnects you further from them. And it also it doesn't give you the observation. So calling someone selfish is an analysis. That is your perception of what you think about them. It is your diagnosis of them. But if you say that they care for their needs in this moment rather than anybody else's, that may be true, you know? So
That's great. That's great. I can be quite a black and white person when I think about things. So like to me, if they're selfish, so I'm not going to try and flower the words up. They're just selfish.
yeah.
I'm not going to try and yeah, if it causes disconnection, it's fine. Like I know I can be selfish, but I know that if someone has to say something about it, then and it's affecting them, then I'll change and I'll be less selfish. Because sometimes I'm just imperfect, you know? But some people really just are that selfish that they don't care. And those type of people is just like, I don't really mind, no offense, all due respect, I don't mind that there's a disconnection between you and I.
Mhm.
I'm not
Oh,
bothered that there's so many good people out in the world, like having a few people that are the way they are and having a disconnection to me is okay. It just shows where the relationship is at, and that's fine. I don't mind a disconnection. I don't mind that there's a distance between us. I'll still be respectful, but it doesn't bother me. I'm not going to try and you know make it into something or soften it. But maybe that's
mhm.
just me. Maybe I have a hard heart. You can tell me from your experience or whatever.
No, I think the way that you're saying is how most people think. And I do see how it can kind of separate you from the situation itself, like where you don't have to care as much, or like you're more willing to accept that like they just are the way that they are.
Mm.
Um, and I think that can be helpful to an extent, but I see the value in that as much as I see the value in what I was saying.
Yeah, no, so while you're talking about it, it does it tunes me into a softer side of myself, if I could put it that way. So it tunes me into a side of myself that actually cares if someone does
Yeah.
something, because yeah, I think not caring, and now that I'm thinking about it, not caring, I often tell myself this and other people, not caring is actually it's not a beneficial thing. It is a disconnect. But if you're
Mhm.
unbothered by something, it's totally different from not caring. So if you're
Yeah.
unbothered by the way that someone acts, then that just means that, it just is what it is. But if you don't care, you're like, I don't care. It's like you cutting off. I see what you're saying. You're cutting off your connection to the situation. So I see how that can be a bit
Like,
negative for you as a person, not for the other
yeah.
person, but for yourself.
Yeah.
You're limiting your own energy in the moment, I guess, if you want to say it like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. That's cool. That's a nice way to think about it.
Thank you.
Cool.
Um, so that's we kind of got off a little bit, but that was about
So
can't.
prison words. Yeah, yeah. We were talking about prison words, and then you mentioned labels because I was saying selfish. So yeah.
Yes. That's also something I've cut out. So I kind of have a list that there's more to this, but and I have two different ones. One is certain ways of thinking that incorporate some words, but some are just like the words in general. So I'll go through the ways of thinking first.
Sure.
So can't, that's limiting. We've talked about that. The next one is should. So that carries a lot of weight of expectation. And if you tell someone they should do something, they might feel bad because they aren't doing it or they don't think that way. Or if you think that you should do something, you might do it because of what other people expect from you instead of being driven by your own values. Um, the next one is deserve. That is more of like entitlement language,
Hmm.
or so like if you're like, oh, you didn't deserve that, or oh, they do deserve this, like they did this and they should pay for it or whatever. Um, all that does is disconnect you from the other person. And even though they may have done something that you wish they had done differently,
Hmm.
like to say that they deserve something says more about you than it does them. You know what I mean? So those two kind of fall in the same boat for different reasons, but I think that it's helpful to get away from that kind of language. Even if you do think that it's true, it's not going to help you get the justice that you want. And we want restorative justice, not retributive justice. So
Mm.
that's kind of what we lean towards, and that's what Marshall Rosenberg talks about with all his things. Another one that's kind of surrounded around entitlement is supposed to. That also falls under the category of
So
expectation. Like
like
you're
you're
to,
supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that.
yeah.
I see, I see.
Or oh, I was supposed to do this. Now you feel bad about it because you
Mhm.
didn't. You know. So like, instead of empathizing with your needs in that moment, or like what steps you took to get to where you are, you're just like dwelling on the fact that you didn't do something, and like that's not going to get you anywhere helpful. It's not an effective way of thinking. It's not beneficial to you or anyone around you. That's
So
why.
what is your take? I appreciate what you're saying, and this is just making me think about using the word need. I need to do this. I need to do that. Is that also
Mhm.
something that you would consider a prison word? If I don't know what the label for all of these words is, but I'm gonna say prison word or like not efficient word.
Yeah. Um, so what you're saying is actually a really good question, because um whenever you say I need to do something, you're mixing the need with the request, and that can be um not very beneficial. So if you mix the need with the request, you're saying that there's no other way to meet your need. So if you find
Mm,
the underlying need, say, like someone might say, like, I need you to do this for me, right? That's like a demand. That's not them saying, that's not them asking, it's just demanding it, right? But if you say, um, I need reassurance that this is going to be done, is there any way that you'd be willing to help me get this done whenever you can? That's more asking, and they're not gonna feel obligated. If they say yes, they're more than likely gonna be saying yes out of an energy that is joyful, and that they are getting joy out of giving that to you, whatever the effort is and whatever it is. But if you say, I need you to do this, they're going to see it as, I have to do this because they told me to. And that just creates like, they're demanding me to do it. And if I don't do it, they're probably not going to like me and all this stuff. They're expecting this from me. And that puts a lot of pressure on someone, which takes the joy out of giving.
hmm.
Mm.
Cool. Oftentimes it's the intention behind what you're saying,
Yes.
how you're saying it. That's what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
With a need, it's the intention behind the need that will make it something that should be responded to or not,
Yes. And separating the need from the request.
separating the need from the request. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, interesting. And so while you were saying all of that, I was thinking about the idea of, I said it earlier, but so when I label something, it's disconnecting me from the situation. So I don't know if you know what Reiki is. It's like energy healing. You ever heard of it? You have.
I
Okay.
never heard of it.
You've heard of it. Okay, cool. So it's a form of energy healing, and the whole idea is to keep yourself in balance, because an imbalance in your energy creates a disturbance for yourself. It puts you in a space of dis-ease. So like
Yeah.
disease, but dis-ease. So I don't like to use the word disease because it's just a space of dis-ease. So it's a space you've gotten yourself in through whatever reasons or whatever has happened that now is making you uncomfortable. Whether it's like
Mm.
a severe dis-ease or a light dis-ease, it's still a space of uncomfortability. So
Yeah.
the point with Reiki is to learn to bring yourself back into balance and not disconnect yourself from situations through limiting beliefs or labels like what you were saying, because that ultimately creates an imbalance in your own energy field. And now I'm not saying that you need to be perfect and like 100% balance all the time, because that's impossible. But it's just to put it into perspective, or like add to what you were saying, is that
Yeah.
disconnection at the end of the day affects you. It doesn't affect the situation. It's just like forgiveness affects, or not forgiving someone affects you. It doesn't actually affect the person. So if they do something and you hold on to it for the rest of your life, that brings you down. It doesn't actually bring that person down. Or like having resentment, resentment actually only affects you. It doesn't really affect the other person unless you let that resentment out at the person, you know, where you're like, ah, rah, rah, rah. But the person could still just be like, cool, you know, it doesn't affect me. It's your
Yeah,
resentment, not mine. It's your anger. It's your unforgiveness. It's your disconnection, not mine. So
that's
yeah,
like if you're mean to someone because you think they deserve it, like it says way more about you than it does them.
it does about them. Yeah, and you're creating a disconnection in your own flow of, like, I want to say divinity, or like a higher compassionate feeling for someone.
Yeah.
And so that's why it could be important to remember, and I'm saying this for myself, to not disconnect myself from situations through like the use of labels or so on and so forth,
Yes.
or like
I
prison
like that.
words, can't, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, another one would be this can be taken the wrong way, so I'm going to preface this by saying this applies when it relates to you describing someone, okay, or something that they do. This isn't talking generally. So, right and wrong, I cut it out all the time. If I'm talking about someone, I don't say they are right, they are wrong, um, they were making the right decision, they were making the wrong decision, things like that, because A creates shame, B, it creates this like idea that you know what is right out of everybody else and everything else in the world. Like, you know, objectively that that is the right thing, which is sort of entitlement. Even though there can be things that align with your values, but your values are not the same for someone else, you know. Anyways, um, also with right and wrong, it creates this like if you're doing something and you say, oh, I did the wrong thing, like you instantly either regret it, you sometimes some people hate themselves for doing it or wish they hadn't or whatever. But if you can empathize with yourself and the choice that you made in that moment, then you're more likely to like take action after making that decision in the direction that you want it to go. Whereas if you think that you're wrong for doing something, you're going to be stuck in a cycle of like, I shouldn't have done it, or like they were wrong, like I didn't deserve this, or I was supposed to do this, I was wrong, like all of those other words we talked about earlier kind of go into the right and wrong thing. And if you're playing a game of who's right and wrong between you and someone else, you're not going to connect on it. You're not going to like come to a middle ground. There's either going to be giving in or giving up. And either way, it's a loss. Like you're not going to be connected by the end of it. Someone's giving in or someone's giving up, and that takes all the joy out of enriching life and all the joy out of giving and helping each other. So
Yeah,
that's
it's like the strongest vibration wins at the end of the day, right? So the strongest doesn't mean the person who can dominate the other person. It just means the one that can hold their vibration of understanding or groundedness or whatever is going to win in the end, because they have the stronger force behind them. Because yeah, at the end of the day, it's the good always wins, you know, through whatever the dynamic is at that point. If you hold a strong enough vibration of your values and so on and so forth, you will reach a higher platform naturally than someone who's holding on to lower vibrational stuff, because they're holding themselves down, basically, you know, they're not allowing themselves to vibrate at a higher energy, if we're looking at this in terms of energy. And that brings me to a point of, so how one can do that, or how I was thinking about it, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is that you respect the person. So say, for instance, you have an issue with someone, or there is an issue between you and someone. You respect the person and you try and address the behavior. So you don't label the person, you address the behavior that they're showing. So you learn to direct your energy or your dissatisfaction or your unease at the behavior that the person's showing. And we can see this is just something that I heard or read about at some point, is that this is what parents fail to do, is that they fail to, when correcting their child, they tend to fail to let the child know that they're not the issue. So when you're correcting your child, you should correct the child's behavior, but not and remind the child that they're still loved, that they're still a good person, even though they made a mistake, or they did something that was completely out of character, or something that was less beneficial. But 10 to 1 parents will correct their child, and they will make the child feel like they're not good enough in that process. Like there's a fault with me, the child, and that creates insecurity in the child. I don't know if I'm making sense. This is just what was coming to my mind at the moment. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is
They
where,
say
yeah,
connection over correction.
the
Connection over correction.
connection of or over correction.
Over correction.
Yeah, connection. Yeah, and that's nice, because someone said this to me a while ago, is that the relationship should matter more than the issue. So you address the issue, and you say what needs to be said to balance the issue out as much as you can, but you still maintain a connection. You still maintain a relationship in some way or another. If it's a distance relationship where you just respect each other from a distance, or if you bring them closer or whatever, but you don't cut the connection off, because, that's just, again, that says something about you and not about the situation or the person at hand. Yeah.
And if you think about, like, do you think a small child is more willing to hear you when you say, like, don't do that, you're not supposed to be getting into that, or how many times do I have to tell you, get away from that, like all that stuff? Or if you say, like, I'm scared because, I want you to be safe, and I think that if we come over here and do this, then it'll give me that reassurance to know that you're safe. Like, they can hear that you care about them in that. Whereas if you're just demanding them or telling them what they're doing wrong, like, it's gonna make them want to do it more. Like, I hate to say that, but like, it's true. And if you think about this is the one thing that, I want to have kids when I get older. This is like the one thing that has stuck with me that I want to implement when I have kids, is that think about the energy that you want them to make decisions out of. Do you want it to be out of fear of disappointment? Do you want it to be out of rebelling against you? Or do you want it to be out of them seeing the value of the decisions that they're making? If you tell them you're not supposed to do that, you can't do that, that's wrong, then, like, if they do it, they're gonna be like, or if they don't do it, they're gonna be doing it out of fear of disappointment, or fear that you won't love them anymore, and that is like what disconnects a lot of people from their parents, is that those expectations and not seeing the value in their decision making. And so if you allow them to have a choice, I know small children aren't like equipped to make big decisions for themselves, but giving them two decisions that they can pick from that are both beneficial to them is way better than saying, don't do this, or you can't do this,
I mean,
or whatever.
how are they going to get good at making bigger decisions if you don't first give them little decisions, right? So you have to give them small responsibilities based on their awareness or their level of awareness. And then as they grow up, then you can give them more responsibility and more, a deeper, more important decision to make with whatever the case may be. And that gives them that empowers them, as opposed to takes their power away from them. Yeah. And I like what you're saying, because it links strongly to something that I speak about quite a lot. It's something called generational trauma. So generational trauma, if you know or not, is something that gets passed down from your parents to you, and from their parents to them, and you can date it all the way back. So every family line has like their generational trauma of things that were never worked on, or things that were embedded in everybody's subconscious, that were just, certain behaviors and limiting beliefs and ways of thinking and doing and believing, or whatever the case may be. And that just gets passed down from one generation to the next generation to the next generation to the next generation. So what I'm getting from what you're saying is that NVC ultimately is a useful tool for yourself to learn how to
Break
stop
those
doing
habits.
that. Yeah, break a habit,
Mhm.
break a negative way of thinking, of doing, of being, not just for next generations, but also for the people around you at this point in time, because ultimately the tone you set can influence people, and the
Yes.
more true you are and authentic you are, the more effect you will have in the world around you, just naturally through like ripples of your, you know, of your vibe, if you want to say it like that.
Yeah, exactly. The way you present your feelings and needs and anything, the way that you present your words has so much more effect on other people than you realize. Like you may think that that's the only thing like regulating you, but really it has an effect on everybody around you, whether you think about it or not.
Mm.
And to the point about we were talking about kids, it's like the second you turn your back, they're gonna keep doing it if your whole life, if their whole life you've been saying what they need to do, if you're giving them demands, the second they don't have someone demanding them to do it, they're gonna switch. Like they may be fine in acting the way that you want them to when you're looking, but the second you turn your back, it's not gonna be like that, you know? If you want them to be able to make decisions that will be beneficial for them, even when you're not around, teaching them to make those decisions is the most important thing that you can do rather than making them for them.
That's also a good characteristic of a good leader. So in today's
Mhm.
day and age, there's this whole like rise of like masculinity again, and because there was this whole thing about toxic masculinity, and men started stepping up and being like, we're just being men. So anyway, so good leadership does also, in my opinion, good leadership is, or a good leader is someone who can empower others, as opposed to a leader who just has control over everything. Someone who has control over everything doesn't leave space or air for other people to breathe. And in my opinion, that's just a sign of insecurity from that leader, because someone who wants absolute control is not someone who is in a healthy space within himself, you know?
Yeah. To
Someone
deny
who,
someone of like manipulation.
yeah, exactly. So someone who is who empowers others and wants to see the best in them and gives them the ability to become good leaders themselves, that to me is a sign of someone who's a really good leader, because that
Yes.
person is sharing their leadership qualities with other people. And to me, that's what abundance is about. Someone who wants to be completely in control is not in a state of abundance. It may seem on an external level, because they're in a position of power, that they have abundance, but the way they're expressing it is not an abundant expression. Actually it's a lack expression. I need to be in control. No one can do this other than me. I'm the only leader, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, that to me is just like, wow, okay, that doesn't quite sound quite right. You may be in a leadership position, but the way you're expressing your energy and how you're going about this doesn't give off like an abundant vibe, which in my opinion, a good leader should have an abundant mindset, should be in an abundant energy, at least for the most part. Obviously, everyone's got their faults and flaws, but they should at least understand the idea of progressing and being more abundant with their leadership, because ultimately all of us are leaders in some way or another, whether it's in a big way or a little way, whether we're just, because we all have to lead ourselves at the end of the day. The
Yeah.
way that everything you do in your life, the way you wake up, how you spend your day, what you do in your day, you have to lead yourself for the most part, And then
Yeah.
there's other people as well that can inspire you and guide you and do all of those things. But ultimately, you have to do the things in your life that you know are good and that are, well, not good, but that are beneficial for you. Um, yeah. So yes.
I will say that need for autonomy is very real and it is in everybody. Because one thing about needs is everybody has the same needs. It's just our strategy in getting those
And
needs
getting
met.
whether we manipulate like this or manipulate like that, or
Yeah.
through, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that need for autonomy is very prevalent and very important because if you have no choice in anything, then it can create the sense of like helplessness. And oftentimes, when people need autonomy the most, they deny other people of choice, which is what they're trying to get away from. And which is kind of funny because it's like you don't want it to happen to you, so you're gonna make it to happen everyone around you, like
It's like,
you
you
know.
know that
So
saying, while you're trying to fight demons, don't become the demon that you're fighting against, you know?
yeah,
Because oftentimes that is what happens. People set out with like this really good intention to do something, and then they end up becoming everything that they don't, or that they're fighting against through
self
trying to fight it,
sabotage.
you know? Self-sabotage. I wouldn't say self-sabotage, but more just like when you associate with something, then you become more like that. So if your enemy is a certain way, you have to learn about your enemy, and then people don't learn to disconnect from that and remember their values. So they forget, they're not grounded enough in themselves, they're not mature enough in themselves to remember their values. So then they start thinking so much about something that they actually start becoming and behaving like that, which anyway, it's just something to be aware of. I know I fall into that trap sometimes, and I'm often made aware like, hey, don't become like the things you are fighting against in the world, you know, because that's, you're not doing anybody a favor, you're just making it worse, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like what she said about that. I think that's an important point to bring up.
Thanks. Great. Cool. So yes, so let me just check my, I had some more questions, but I think that we are heading towards the end now. So I think we went over why the world should know about MVC without actually asking the question. I think we, through our conversation, we did address that. And yeah, so I guess if do you want to add anything more before I bring everything to a conclusion?
I think there's one more thing that I would add.
Hmm.
This is just an easier way to remember. I call this the 4 Ds of disconnection. So there's diagnosis, denial of responsibility, demands, and deserved language. Those can tell you that you're disconnected from your needs. So we said anger, guilt, shame, depression. And then normally the things that lead up to those are denial of responsibility, diagnosis, demands, and deserved language. So those two go hand in hand with each other. And yeah, I thought that would be helpful to mention because it's easy to remember 4 things that start with the same letter.
So denial, diagnosis, what is
Demand and deserve.
demand and deserve language? Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. It's always interesting talking to new people. This is why I like talking to people, is because always learn something new, you know? I think a
Yeah.
lot of people in the world have such a fear, and I mean, I do too, how I did have such a fear of speaking to people, you know?
Yeah.
So like I adopted this mindset because I realized that, you know, life is short, and why do I want to spend my time being scared of other people when I could just embrace that I know I can learn from a situation. So whether
Yeah.
I walk past someone in the shop and I'm drawn to them, you know, I generally will just say, hey, what's up? You know, or hey, nice shoes. Hey, nice hair. Hey, say something, because you never know what is going to come out of a conversation. You may end up making a new friend. You may end up sharing something that the person needs to hear. They may end up sharing something that you need to hear. Like you've said a lot of stuff that I could really learn from. And yeah, it's great. And this is the beauty of the world. You know, we all have something to share with one another. Some things are not so good, and you know, some people have not so good things to share with other people. But if you have the right mindset, then you can learn from it anyway. You know, not everything has to be pretty and packaged nice in order for you to receive it. Sometimes the best lessons actually come from the messiest situations, you know, like hitting rock bottom or having a big blowout with someone that you thought was so close to you, and blah, blah, blah. And then you reflect, and then you learn like, oh, okay, cool. Now I know a better way of doing it. Or now I see where I was going wrong, and I see where I'm at fault. And, you know, now I can correct and grow for the future.
Absolutely. I think in those moments of ambiguity is where we sort of build up our values and create them.
Mm.
And I think that's when they show up in the weirdest ways, but end up sticking with us the longest. Um, but I think all in all, what we can say about NVC is that um, it connects us on an authentic level. It helps us diffuse and resolve any relationships that have conflict. Um, you can rekindle your connections with people and speak up in tough moments and find joy in giving and contributing to the well-being of other people.
It's very nice. I like what you said about rekindling a connection. Oftentimes, well, this is what I've been stumbling upon lately, is that oftentimes people don't know how to reconnect after there has been a blowout, after there has been an issue. And so they let the issue determine the entire relationship, even if it's been a very tight-knit relationship and it's been a very deep relationship and a long relationship. One big issue that comes up destroys the whole thing because people don't know how to reconnect. They don't know how to keep the connection of respect for the relationship, and therefore the whole relationship just dissipates because of an issue. So that's something that I'll take away from NVC, or one of the things I'll take away is that remembering connection, remember to stay connected to yourself, which is what I see NVC teaches you to do in a way. It remain connected to yourself and your values, which will help you to stay connected to other people, within reason. Yeah.
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 And I really like what you said about you said that how because it is like a disconnector that sometimes um what you're kind of leading to was that they'll give out of duty or obligation and um like rekindling those relationships. Sometimes people will blame it on the situation. They might not blame the person, but they'll say, oh well, this happened, so I can't do that or whatever. That's like taking away your ability to make a decision in that is blaming it. Like people say, oh, I had to do this, I just had to. Or like they say, so and so told me to. And that's the reason for doing it, not because they see the value in it. So I think it's important to step away from that also whenever you're thinking about rekindling relationship or reevaluating any sort of thing like that is don't blame the person or the situation. Just see it how it is and try to work through it.
I like it. Thank you. Easier said than done. So it's
Yes,
definitely
very much so.
it's something to grow into. It's something that obviously I just saw your recent post about consistency. So it's definitely a practice that should be consistently applied. And only through the consistency do you actually get better at it. If you just stop because you're like, this is tough, that's oftentimes often the times that will teach you the most about what you're trying to do is when things get tough. Because then you really have to apply, you have to like preach to yourself that, I already know what to do. Now I just have to apply the knowledge and actually make, a lemon from lemonade, or
Yeah.
lemonade from lemons. The way around, yeah.
Best practice too is those moments where you're like, I never want to feel like this again. I hope this never happens again. Those are the most important moments to practice. And I swear those moments will be life changers if you try this out.
Yeah, that's oftentimes, I think, for me, whenever I've made like a mess up or made a mistake, I remember the feeling I was left with. And that feeling helps me, that's a reminder to not do that again. Because I don't
Yeah.
want to feel like that again. I don't want to feel that way again. And yeah, so I remember that feeling, and then I just like, okay, so what can I do differently? Because I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go to that same feeling. I don't want to go to that same place. I don't want to, like, for instance, within a relationship, something happens. I don't want to hold on to all that unforgiveness this time, because I've done it before and I saw how it only brought me down in the long run. So this time when something happens, I want to be more aware to open my heart up again and, practice something like NVC or at least the techniques in NVC. Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Good to remember.
It's for yourself and everyone around you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like it. I like it. I like it. So if I could say anything, like with Reiki in particular, so you get to being a master Reiki practitioner. So you go through like some years of study and all that stuff. And one of the things about becoming a master Reiki practitioner, or a master, it's just a teacher, a Reiki teacher, is that you have to eventually, the responsibility falls on you to add something to the practice, something that none of the teachers are adding. So you have to use your own flavor and your own intelligence. So if I could suggest anything for you to add to NVC, is to flip it into compassionate communication, not nonviolent communication. Just a request from my side to your side. If you could somehow do that, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
I like that. I've often thought about the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know how you would get it right. I mean, without causing disturbance, but somehow, some way, I don't know. Yeah.
Like reinvent it a little bit.
Reinvent a little bit. Yeah, reinvent the wheel. Yeah. Just add your own flavor to it, because that's what makes it, like, nobody is you and I, right? So even though we're doing the same thing that someone else has done, we have a unique perspective because we're an individual and we have an individual experience. So we can add something from our individuality into what we're doing. And that's what makes it our own, even though it's not our own, but we make it our own through our individual expression of whatever we're doing. So yeah.
That
Yeah.
got my ideas going.
Yeah. And the cool thing is experimenting with it, experiment with ideas, and then eventually you find one that really just sits well and you're like, yes, because oftentimes that's also what the world is looking for, is that authentic individual expression of whatever we're doing. And that's actually what makes like really attractive people, is when they can shine through really authentically with what they're doing. And people are attracted to that because they're like, how can I be like that? Because everybody wants to be real. Everybody actually intrinsically wants to be their authentic self. So if you can find that in yourself and express it, yeah.
I think what you're saying is like having that confidence. The thing that I learned about that is to have confidence is to have acceptance in yourself. So confidence is normally seen as something like you need to have someone else's approval, or like you need to not care what other people think or whatever, but really it's accepting yourself and the things about yourself that you want to be confident about.
And oftentimes it's accepting the things that you find like cringe about yourself. You turn those into like your PowerPoints, that's exactly how you do it. At least that's how I've seen it within myself. Building my own confidence is learning to take the parts that I find awkward about myself and just owning it, just making it me. Because I mean, it's here anyway. So if I'm pushing it aside and trying to like keep it at arm's length, I'm like neglecting a part of myself, which is never going to find a place within me and a part of my like kingdom of who I am, unless I just allow it in and then just be like, you know what? I am this way. So what? You're either going to like me or you're going to dislike me. And that's not my issue at the end of the day.
No, I love what you said, because it makes me think about, like I always say, there's always going to be someone smarter than me. There's always going to be someone prettier than me. There's always going to be someone that knows more about something than I do. But the thing is, like, if you want to have a relationship with me, if you want to be friends with me, then like you're going to want it because of I am who I am, not because I'm trying to be like someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what people are attracted to it. And they're attracted to you for who you are. And now if you start chopping and changing because you're like, oh, now I have to be someone else, or I feel like I need to be something different, then the people are going to stop being attracted to you, because that's what they saw. And they were like, damn, look at that. Yeah. So I don't know why we're talking about this, but on the topic of this, it's not about changing who we are. It's about refining who we are. So you don't want to change yourself. You just want to refine yourself so that you can become the best version of all the stuff that's in you, Yeah.
Or if you do change things about yourself, don't do it based on what people think you should do, or like other people's expectations. Do it because you see the value in you changing,
Exactly. You realize that this is a behavior that is not efficient or not beneficial for me. So let's try and create something different out of it, you know, mold it in a different way or whatever. Yeah.
Come up with a new strategy. Yeah.
Come up with a new strategy. Yeah, exactly. I like it. Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. I think I mentioned my takeaway earlier, so I'm just going to reiterate it just for like a concluding statement. But so what I took away from NVC was that they're basically like 4 things. So simplicity was the first one. So remembering the simple things, remembering your needs, remembering, you know, those types of things when you're in a difficult situation, bring it back to you and what you're feeling and how, what needs you need to communicate. And then that leads into the next one, which was vulnerability, learning to not be afraid to communicate whatever it is that you're feeling, you know? So, I mean, in a way that's conducive for the functioning of the relationship. So I need some love. I feel like I need some connection. I feel like there's a lack of connection, and that's just, you know, that's what I feel like I need at the moment. And the third thing was emotional regulation. So finding a method to help yourself out of intensity into a more calm space so that you can communicate from the calm space as opposed to the intense emotional space. Because often that's a space where we're gonna make mistakes, like heavy mistakes. Like when you're very angry and you're saying stuff out of anger, you can really hurt people, which ultimately you don't want to do. So you want to learn to emotionally regulate yourself.
Yes.
And then, yeah, and then I think the last thing was, the main thing was that remember that the connection is better, or we should value the connection over the issue, or the connection over the correction, as you said. So, yeah.
Definitely. I love that.
Yeah.
Also, if anybody wants to learn more about this, I know you mentioned my Instagram earlier, but it's nonviolent communication _. That's where you can find it. And I share everything that I've learned on there. Like every week I post, every day I post 3 times a day. Like, you can't miss it.
Good. I'm also doing that same strategy, trying to go, not like I don't do it every day, but like when I post at least 4, 5, 6 days a week, 3 posts every time. Bam, bam, bam. So what
it works better.
Hey?
I say it works better.
It does, yeah, yeah. It gets more views and all that stuff. But anyway, so what I'm going to do with this is that I will post your Instagram handle under the YouTube video. So this whole video is going onto YouTube, and then I'm going to cut it up in sections, and I'm going to post small snippets on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok.
Sounds good.
And then I'll just tag you in it, or I'll put your handle so people can find you. So yeah, you'll see what happens from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate meeting you. Yeah. And yeah, I appreciate our discussion. It was cool.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed getting to talk with you.
Pleasure. I will see you soon.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye.
Have a good day.
Yeah.